Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Action podcast series. Today with me I have my esteemed guest Nadia Rouchdy, who's the head of climate at Emirates Nature WWF. She's also been tasked in heading up the UAE Alliance for Climate Action, UACA. So welcome, Nadia.
Thank you for having me.
We all know the climate emergency and how important climate action is needed today. UAE has been one of the front runners in addressing their decarbonization actions and specifically in setting up the UAE Alliance for Climate Actions. I will dive straight into the questions, Nadia. Can you maybe share with us how the UAE Alliance is aligned to the Global Alliance for Climate Action and perhaps set the scene for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. Emirates Nature WWF has been the WWF UAE office here for 22 years in the UAE. So we have a really rich, long history in working on, biodiversity, climate, nature, and engaging with youth and indigenous communities. So climate has not been a new topic. We've been engaging on this topic for a really long time. We worked with private sector on energy efficiency, renewable energy, climate adaptation, mitigation, etc. And so last year, after this journey, we really felt that there was space for creating this collaborative nature and this collaborative platform for organizations, especially non-state actors, which was a term last year that was quite new for the UAE, which really means, subnational level entities, which includes private sector, but also financial institutions, universities, other civil society organizations like ourselves, to really come together and figure out how can we, create the enabling environment for decarbonization in a way that's aligned to science. Of course, pushing Paris-aligned targets, science-based targets, and really trying to see, what are the areas that we can address to make sure that implementation is really strong. So we modeled our alliance after the Global Alliances for Climate Action, of which WWF International is a founding partner of. And these alliances really are what I just said, gathering stakeholders together in a nationally determined context that makes sense for the country. So, our alliance will have a different context than the alliance that we see in the US called America's All In South Africa, in Australia, there's one in Brazil and Mexico, Japan, etc. So each alliance is developed based on their own national context, but essentially gathering stakeholders together to activate further implementation and target setting on decarbonization that's aligned to Paris. And so essentially we launched last year at COP27 called the UAE Alliance for Climate Action, or UACA. And essentially we've launched we already have 35 members that are participating that make up, various sectors of the private sector, multinationals, local companies, all with the intention of really galvanizing action and implementation to meet, the 1.5 target that we have at the global level.
So you mentioned, yes, the Global Alliance is a national kind of focus to push the agenda on climate actions. 9 countries, if I'm not mistaken, that have their alliance locally. Specifically in the UAE, can you paint the picture? How do you work with Ministry of Climate Change and Environment? How do you support that national dialogue and that national agenda?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the beginning of this project, we always wanted to make it a whole of society approach. We didn't want to work in silo and just try to action our own agenda. We wanted to involve as many stakeholders as possible and make sure that we were creating an agenda that made sense for the country. So we worked immediately with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. We're officially endorsed by them. And we are almost seen as an accelerator or an enabler of the Climate Responsible Pledge, which is a pledge set up by the Ministry of Climate Change for companies, the private sector, to pledge towards net zero. So we are taking all those members on board, and those who want to sign our pledge are able to join and attend workshops, capacity building sessions, and really increase their own readiness to set net zero targets. So 100% supporting the national strategic initiative of net zero by 2050, working very closely with federal stakeholders as well as Emirate level stakeholders, but also really trying to be informed by global, strategies like the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, which is the agenda for the high-level champion, and really being that domestic enabler for the Marrakesh Partnership, high-level champion and climate change teams to be able to see non-state actors really race to zero and also be a domestic enabler for a race to zero. So very much aligned, and also we onboard other stakeholders that are working in the decarbonization space. So Clean Energy Business Council is one of our partners. We're working with BCG as well. We're onboarding other international and NGOs on board that have a stake in SBTI and decarbonization, because we're so much stronger if we come together, and we don't want to replicate anything that is in other people's agendas. We need to do this together. You know, the IPCC states we have 7 years really to have emissions. That is a very short timeline. We have the technologies in place to do that across all sectors. We really need to put our brains together to get it done.
Okay. So maybe if you could paint the picture specifically, what are some of the activities UACA is working with the ministry to push the agenda from a national perspective? And if you can just share with us.
So broadly, the program does many things, and then I can touch on what we do with the ministry. So, you know, as UACA, we are looking to, obviously, you know, capacity building and awareness is super important. Data is really, really important, trying to derive information from the private sector on what their barriers are, what we can achieve. So a lot of surveys that are data-driven, qualitative and quantitative, policy papers, policy briefings to inform also how we move forward with some of that enabling kind of environment that we want to discuss. So trying to see what policies that are coming from the private sector so we can be that conduit between the private sector and kind of federal or government, emirate level entities. And so those are the key components. We also have tools that we're developing for corporates to either set their baseline emissions, set their targets, or really creating free accessible tools to help get them done. But also trying to use this as an incubator for new ideas. Okay. So one of the scopes and work streams that we're working on right now is, and what we hear a lot from organizations, is scope 3 is a massive issue. Data is a massive issue. Supply chain kind of engagement is a massive issue. So we're actually working with some entities on doing a flagship program that will address some of those issues that we see. So it's a lot of listening, and it's a lot of kind of activating what we hear. But, you know, peer-to-peer learning, capacity building, policy engagement, roundtables, et cetera, is what we're doing. And with the ministry specifically, I mean, a really big focus is going to be on accountability and transparency, and trying to leverage as much as possible the information that we have from our members and the climate responsible pledge companies to really make sure that people are understanding where we sit today and how we can increase that ambition. And delivering some of the projects that I was mentioning on scope 3 will be really important.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because as we know, you rightfully mentioned scope 3 is, I think, starting the journey is always the biggest challenge. Setting those net zero targets if they haven't started. So really onboarding from a capacity building perspective to help organizations set their targets and help them through that journey. But specifically, I mean, if I was an organization that pledged to the MOCA Climate Pledge, how would you help them through that journey, as you rightfully mentioned?
Yeah. So we've had several webinars with SBTI, Race to Zero, on the methodology. We have some technical consultants that are available to help companies in their journey. I think, like you said, look, it is very difficult. It's not something that's going to happen in 6 months. You need to start the journey. But again, we're also asking some companies that do join to set a commitment to us to align to SBTI. So we already have a subset of organizations that have indicated to us by Q1 of this year, we will commit to SBTI. So we're really trying to push that and align to kind of global methodologies. But essentially, you know, we want to handhold as much as possible without, you know, doing the work for them. But it's really about giving them the access to tools, giving them the access to other members that are doing this, but also understanding that they're going to need some time to do this. So like I said, giving them the tools, baselining, digital solutions, target setting tools, which we're developing, which are quite innovative, and to help them be able to build a business case to their management. So I think CEO engagement is one of the tracks that we're also engaging on to see. We have an advisory committee that we're engaging really high-level CEOs, high-level champion, et cetera, to be able to get that top-down kind of approach, but also get the bottom-up technical folks to really kind of be able to deliver on that. Having said that, I mean, we're seeing good progress. I mean, if you look at this year's SBTI UAE-based companies, we've seen threefold increase since last year. So that's really positive. I mean, a lot of these folks they're not new, you know, they've been working on sustainability and decarbonization for a long time. So it's not surprising. But I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot more signatories to Race to Zero, a lot more signatories to SBTI, and a lot more people kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying, okay, we have the technical knowledge to be able to do it. We have some uncertainties, but if we have the CEO buy-in, let's just kind of commit to SBTI and use the next 2 years, because there are 2 years to validate their targets, and try to figure that out to the best of our ability. And we're trying to push that as much as possible by using our links. You know, WWF is a founding partner of SBTI, using our links with Race to Zero and SBTI to give capacity, provide methodology updates, and kind of guidance and the tools on the ground to be able to deliver that. So that's how we're trying to do it. But at the same time, it's worth mentioning that we hear a lot from our members. We need this. We need more of this. And we implement that every quarter. We update our plans to say, okay, we might not have all the answers. We might not have all the resources, but we've heard this and this from members. Where can we go from the community and get that information to deliver technical workshops, to deliver webinars, or to create more tools to be able to deliver that?
So what message, I know as a multinational or multi-international organizations, yes, you would have the resources behind to kind of commit to SBTI. What would be your message to companies that are medium enterprise or startups or SMEs that not necessarily have the resources to support, all of this monitoring, this reporting, and implementation of their net zero agendas, but also still starting their journeys? They're very eager and they want to support climate actions, of course, but how will you help them through this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, SMEs make up the backbone of this country, right? And I think they're so important. There is a lot of action and work being done to engage SMEs. And I'm excited because there's a lot of work going on in the background that we're going to be hearing more about at COP28 for SMEs. So I'm excited to see that. And some of the tools that we're developing actually address this exact question. We have a baselining tool that we have right now that makes it super simple for SMEs to just understand what their emissions could look like and how they could calculate it. So our tool is really, really simple, easy to use, but it could be used by a variety of organizations. And actually what we're doing for our current members who have, in our membership, we have organizations in total have over 15,000 suppliers. So we're also engaging our members to say, send these tools to your supply chain so that they can start baselining and they can feed into your scope 3 targets.
Domino effect.
Exactly. And so I think at the very onset, even though it can be very intimidating, just to open up this tool and understand what scope 1, 2, and 3 is and where it could look like, and starting to pull in that data is a really important step, and our tool can help do that. But I think it's really, you have to take the plunge. You have to at least understand scope 1, 2, and 3. Okay, they might not understand what that is. They won't have a sustainability person on the ground to allocate one project lead. And even if they have no understanding of decarbonization, just to engage in UACA, attend the workshops and webinars, really will get a sound understanding of what's possible. And using our tools, I really think that anybody who doesn't have a sustainability or decarbonization background would be able to jump in and be able to implement quite rapidly if they have the willingness and the CEO kind of top level buy-in.
And I like that. You don't really have to be a sustainability professional to adopt any of these principles. So if we have non-state actors that want to onboard, what would be the process? I know you mentioned a lot about within our members and part of our membership portfolio. How and what is the process for the non-state actors to work and be a member with UACA?
Yeah, so every member who joins is the same thing. We have a pledge that they have to commit to. And the pledge is really about increasing ambition. So you can join at any stage of your journey. You considered decarbonization this morning, you can join. You've been talking decarbonization 10 years, you can join. However, you do join at a certain level, and that the ask is that within 1.5 to 2 years, and it depends on what level you join, you've increased your ambition. So depending on your starting point, there is this journey that we take you through that either starts by saying, okay, you have to at least baseline your emissions. The next step is then to let us know when you're going to set your target. And then if you are SBTI aligned, or eligible, set your target with SBTI or commit to setting a target or commit to us to setting a target. So depending on where you are, we ask for that commitment and increase ambition. And again, we do this because we want to make sure that organizations that join are serious.
Yes.
We don't want greenwashing of saying we've joined UACA and that's it. We can't sit idle. We need to really rapidly implement decarbonization strategies and activities. So it depends on where you are, but the pledge is quite simple. It needs to be signed by the head of the organization. It's free to join. It's absolutely free. And essentially just commit to increasing your ambition at the scale needed to kind of meet the science that we know we're kind of not on track to meet.
True. The biggest thing with pledges, it doesn't matter if it's in UAE or in any other country, and commitments to national dialogue, from a non-state actor perspective, it's like, do I have to share my data? What sort of information do I have? Am I being monitored? What if I am not on track on a yearly basis? Do I get struck off the roll? Kind of thing. So what message would you share with our listeners regarding this process?
I mean, for us, collaboration is the most important. So ambition and collaboration go hand in hand. We can't do this if we have people, leaving. We need people to be engaged. So for us, it's about listening. What are the barriers that you're facing to not be able to achieve, what you had set out to do? If we see organizations are engaged, are attending, are participating, are sharing feedback, for us, that's key. Like I said, it's really to avoid a greenwashing exercise. And we don't suspect that any of our members are doing that. And I guess the point is that if you're engaged in the alliance, you're not going to be asked to leave. But if there is a massive breach that we feel is important, yes, of course, then those things we need to take into consideration because it affects all the membership. But we know there are barriers. They're there. They're obvious. We're working on some of them with our members. But as long as we see internal progress, it doesn't have to be that you have to validate your target immediately. But if we see that internally you're pushing your agenda and you're actually delivering on them, or you tell us why, then we're not going to be, naming and shaming. That's not the exercise that we want to do here. I think in the collaborative spirit that we have, and we have a charter of, what our principles are, you'll see that very prominently. And if members want to reach out, they can get that charter. It's also on our website, UAE, UACA.ae. Transparency and just increased implementation is kind of really key and in partnership. So I think hopefully that message is clear.
I think it's a no-brainer. No fees. It's capacity building. So you learn through the journey, all geared towards having a whole of society collaborative action. And as I said, it's a no-brainer. Ultimately.
And I mean, think about it. We get all these sustainability practitioners who are working on similar issues, who all fit in each other's supply chain, coming to the table together, who can actually activate their own partnerships bilaterally on the side, which we've seen, and who can increase their own ambition or work together to do initiatives that they would have been not able to do alone. So those peer-to-peer sessions and coming together and learning and listening has been really critical for a lot of people who are at the beginning of their journey. And sometimes they even mirror or kind of mentor other people who are in similar journeys. So we've seen really great things happen that have not been a result of us, but have happened organically, which we anticipate will continue to happen.
One of the biggest challenges from the non-state actors is, yes, we can commit to actions on the ground, and some of the non-state actors are really immensely, working hard and implementing those actions. But the biggest challenge always comes down to policy. How is UACA supporting that policy agenda, especially from a federal level? And we know in UAE, policy is always up and coming, it's new. But the good thing is that once they are ready, it gets implemented very easily. So especially, if I turn the focus a little bit on the distributed renewable kind of policies and frameworks, how is UACA supporting both the non-state actors and taking this up to a federal level?
Yeah, I mean, really interestingly, we did a workshop with the Clean Energy Business Council on distributed energy, and it was a really great session. We pulled some of the members from the Clean Energy Business Council to deliver this for our members to really raise the level of understanding of what policy looks like, what technology options are, what financing options are, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we did is we actually crowdsources the gaps and the barriers that are being faced by members. So we asked members, what would you like to hear? We curated the agenda based on what we heard from our members and then delivered what they wanted. So the feedback on the workshop was fantastic, and it was really about elevating that understanding. So everyone's starting point is the same. Now, of course, we know that there are barriers that exist. So we've actually come up with a summary document outlining some of those elements. And our plan is to see how we can engage with the relevant stakeholders to see, what barriers we can overcome. But that's the case for many kind of arenas. So at the beginning of each year, and we'll do that again in 2024, we work with members, we send a lot of surveys to understand what areas would they be looking for us to engage on. And that's how we refine our work streams. We then use that information to then plan our work plan. So this year, we did the distributed energy workshop, and we're still identifying exactly the work stream for 2024. COP28 is going to bring a lot of change. And so we also need to keep our ear to the ground to understand. We know that there's been a federal update also for distributed energy at the end of last year. We know there's been a lot of work going on that. So we still are collecting the information from our workshop and from stakeholders to inform our plan for 2024, to be able to do something that meets our members where they're at and what they need, but also is informed by what is going to be coming at COP28.
Okay.
So 2024 is going to be a big year for the policy engagement arena work stream for us. This year has been really focused on capacity building and listening. And I think 2024, once we know what is going to be implemented and what new policies are in place, it'll be very easy for them to see with members where it is that we can plug those gaps and who we need to engage with at the policy level.
COP28, we mentioned a lot in the conversation, around the corner, almost at our doorstep.
Less than 100 days.
Yes, less than 100 days. A lot of the non-state actors are very eager to participate, to kind of support that climate action in terms of national dialogue. How can they work with UACA on their agenda and be part of the conversation at COP28 and beyond? I think this is the most important. Offline, we were talking about what happens beyond COP28. So first, I think maybe if you can share what's your journey for COP28 and how can members or non-state actors be part of that discussion?
So I think it's important to talk, when we talk about COP28, I think there's the nucleus of COP28 that sometimes may get forgotten. And I think it's important to recognize that this is a global negotiation event, right? We have global negotiators coming from all the countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement to come to talk about what are the formal outcomes that are going to be to meet 1.5 and how we're going to do that. So topics related to finance, adaptation, and mitigation, and more, and nature as well is going to be very prominently featured. So that is the nucleus of a COP, conference of the parties, people are coming together to negotiate. That is really, really critical. So I think one really important thing that we're always telling members is, raise the awareness on what is being negotiated, because that is really, really critical so that on a global sense, we're moving towards 1.5. The global stocktake is a really important moment because that's the synthesis report that's going to be coming out for COP28. We know we're not on track to meet 1.5. That's obvious. But the GST, the global stocktake, will have kind of a recommendations report that I think non-state actors will really need to pay attention to, because that's a critical area in which they can activate based on that information. So I think keeping an ear to the ground, building capacity on what a COP is, what negotiation work streams are being happened, and what formal outcomes should we be looking towards. Then there's the non-formal outcomes or the non-negotiated outcomes. And those tend to be kind of more broad in nature, but will also link to mitigation, adaptation, finance, means of implementation, nature, etc. And so I think for us, what we're really pushing is, let's make sure that the UAE is better off having had hosted COP, and that policy, partnerships, projects, and funding are all going towards the right thing, so that we can really see that the UAE had COP, and that we talk about the pre-COP UAE and the post-COP UAE. And that post-COP UAE is stronger, more emboldened. And we know that we're working towards that at the federal level, but that all non-state actors are really committed to delivering that. And, I heard a recent statistic that 9 out of 10 partnerships fail, right? So how can we focus on making strong partnerships that make sense, that are, financed, that are resourced, that have a clear work plan and a clear agenda that is, nationally determined, that will deliver. That for me is key. And, UACA aims to be one of those. And so I think for me, it's using the next less than 100 days for non-state actors to identify what can we do that is additional, that's adding value, that will contribute to any of these areas is super important. Now, to answer your question, because I didn't really answer your question in that, as UACA, we're a platform of non-state actors. WWF International is a constituent observer to the UNFCCC. We're very active in the Blue Zone. As Emirates Nature WWF, we will be active in the Blue Zone, which is more for UNFCCC badged, members. Green Zone is more of a open to the public, and we'll be engaged on both of those sides in a variety of our projects linked to nature, youth, climate, of course, finance. And so for us, UACA, we have space in the Blue Zone. We're going to have events. We're going to have engagements. We work with the ministry, etc. Events are events, right? Yes. But we will be announcing things, and we will be able to provide a platform for members who have strong commitments that are brand new, to give them a platform to do that, because we recognize that it's a good space to do that. So our recommendation really to members is come with really strong ideas, strong partnerships that you want to announce, we can help you announce those. We can position you in certain places. And we will also be announcing some exciting news at COP28 on our work stream on Scope 3. So that will be in collaboration with our partners. But use this moment to really announce strong ambition and targets, and also how you're going to implement those. But then let's also put our heads together in January 2024 to see how we can implement those, because that's going to be really, really important.
Exciting times. And to summarize, I mean, and for our listeners today, what would be your message that you leave with them as to non-state actors that are hesitant to joining UACA? I mean, we've shared throughout the session, it's about capacity buildings, there's no membership fees, and it's really a journey together on climate action to support a national dialogue. So what would be your message to our listeners today that are hesitant, are still unsure, but are already implementing a lot of that climate action requirements as part of their process?
I would say, listen, I mean, the government has made it clear, federal entities have made it clear that this race is on. They're taking it seriously. I know organizations are already taking it seriously. So whether you've chewed on it already and you've considered it, I mean, use the tools that are available in the UAE that are accessible. It doesn't have to necessarily be UACA. I'm not here to push only one action item. Join what makes sense, collaborate with those that make sense. And if UACA makes sense, fantastic. Please join us, and we'll do everything that we can to support you on the journey. But use the tools that are accessible. COP28 we're going to see a plethora of new initiatives, new tools. It's really going to be to the responsibility of these organizations to be able to use those, internalize them where possible, and then reach out for help. Let us know what we can do, what is needed more. We might have blind spots in certain sectors that you can inform us about, that we can then pull in the right people together. So unless we do this together, we're really not going to get anywhere. And it's our role to also contribute to the targets that the UAE has set in its latest NDC. They're ambitious, and they're going to increase in ambition over time. And without non-state actors giving a stronger signal to the federal government to say, we're willing and we're going to participate in this, then it's going to be very hard for them to increase their own ambition too. So it really is a two-way street. So please get in touch, collaborate with partners as much as possible. But, look at what's available. There's so many entities that are working on this topic, and more to come. So, the onus is on everybody, and everyone needs to take it seriously. We have a very short window in which to deliver, decarbonization, slashing emissions by at least 50%. So I think, the task is on, and let's do it together, and let's do it really quickly.
Well, thank you, Nadia. I think, the message is simple. If you are starting your journey, use the tools that UACA have to build that capacity, have the necessary know-how, and start your journey. If you are already on the journey in terms of your climate action and your commitments, again, use your voice as a whole of society to push the national agenda. I think this is clear in terms of the message, and I really would like to thank you for your time explaining how UACA aligns to the national dialogue and going beyond in terms of supporting the Paris Agreement commitments on meeting the 1.5. And as you mentioned, COP28 is going to be a good platform to showcase what UAE is prior and post COP28, that the urgency is now and that climate action is needed to meet that 1.5 degrees. So thank you again, Nadia. I appreciate your time. And to our listeners, if you need to know more information, please reach out to Nadia Rouchdy. She's available, and you can align to the contact us in the UACA website. Thank you very much.